The ballroom glittered with candlelight and laughter, but Serafina felt only cold. She stood near the marble pillar, her champagne untouched, her smile fixed so carefully that her cheeks ached. Around her, the ton whirled in silk and jewels, their voices rising and falling like an elegant tide. No one approached her. No one met her eyes for more than a heartbeat before glancing away. She was the Duchess of Harcourt, and she was invisible. Her husband was not invisible. Lucien Devereux, the Duke of Harcourt, stood in the center of the room with Lady Beatrice Ashton on his arm. His dark head was bent toward her, his rare, devastating smile appearing as she laughed at something he said. He looked at Lady Beatrice the way a man looks at something precious. He never looked at Serafina that way. He never had. 2 years of marriage, 2 years of cold courtesy and careful distance, 2 years of hopping, waiting, dying a little more each day. Poor Duchess, someone murmured behind her, barely lowering their voice. He hasn't danced with her once tonight. He hasn't danced with her all season. My dear, they say he married her only to settle her father's debts. Such a pity. She seems a sweet creature. The words slipped through her ribs like thin blades. Serafina kept her expression serene. She had learned that lesson quickly after her wedding night when Lucien had escorted her to her separate chambers, bowed stiffly, and left her standing alone in a room that felt like a gilded cage. She had cried that night. She had cried many nights since, but never where anyone could see. The music swelled. Lucien led Lady Beatrice into the next waltz, his hand resting at her waist with easy familiarity. Serafina's breath caught. Something inside her cracked a little further. She set her glass on a passing tray and walked, with measured steps, toward the terrace doors. No one stopped her. No one noticed. The night air hit her face, cool and sharp. She gripped the stone balustrade and stared out at the dark gardens, the moon half hidden behind clouds. She would not cry. She was the Duchess of Harcourt. She had dignity even if she had nothing else. The sound of footsteps made her straighten. She turned and her heart lurched. Lucien stood in the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the ballroom's golden light. His expression was unreadable as always. "You left the ballroom," he said, not concerned, merely observing. "I needed air." He stepped onto the terrace, and the door swung shut behind him, muffling the music. "People will talk if the Duchess vanishes." "They are already talking," she said quietly. "I hardly think my absence will change their subject." A flicker of something crossed his face, irritation perhaps. "You imagine slights where none exist." Serafina turned back to the garden, her fingers tightening on the stone. "Do I? Lady Beatrice seems to occupy your attention entirely these evenings. The ton has noticed. I have noticed. Lady Beatrice is a family friend. She is a woman who looks at you as though you hung the stars, and you allow it." Silence stretched between them. She could feel his gaze on her profile, but he said nothing. She had hoped, foolishly, endlessly hoped, that he might deny it, might offer some reassurance. He offered only silence. "I see," she whispered. Then she gathered her shawl around her shoulders and walked past him, back into the glittering crowd that felt emptier than the night. That was the night hope began to die. But hope is a stubborn, desperate thing. It clings even when all reason demands it let go. A fortnight later, Serafina found a fragile new reason to believe. She had organized a small luncheon for some of the local gentry at Harcourt Park. During the event, Viscount Pemberton made a careless, cutting remark about her father's financial misfortunes, loud enough for half the table to hear. Heat flooded her cheeks. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Then Lucien spoke. "My wife's family has faced difficulties with more fortitude than most men display in a lifetime," he said, his voice arctic. "I suggest you remember whose home you are in, Pemberton." The Viscount paled and stammered an apology. The table fell silent. Serafina stared at her husband, her heart pounding. He had defended her in front of everyone. After the luncheon, she found him in the library and thanked him, her voice unsteady. He merely nodded and returned to his papers, but that small act planted a seed. Perhaps he did care, somewhere deep beneath the ice. Perhaps love could grow if she only tried hard enough. She began leaving flowers in his study. She ensured his favorite meals were served. She learned from his valet that he had been sleeping poorly and prepared a special herbal tea, leaving it on his desk with a brief note. He never mentioned the flowers or the tea. He never sought her out. But sometimes, when she passed him in the hall, his gaze would linger on her a moment longer than necessary. Each time, her foolish heart fluttered. The seed of hope grew, fragile and tender. Then came the evening she overheard the truth. She had retired early with a headache but had forgotten her book in the drawing room. Slipping down the back staircase to retrieve it, she passed the half-open door of Lucian's study and heard voices. She paused, recognizing his closest friend, Lord Marcus Ashford. "Must be exhausting, Lucian. 2 years of this farce." Farce is an apt word. Her husband's voice, flat and weary. "I married her to protect Catherine's reputation after that disaster with Wrexham. My sister's scandal would have ruined us both. A quick, respectable marriage was the only shield." Seraphina's blood stilled. Catherine, his younger sister, she knew nothing of a scandal. "And now you're trapped," Marcus said. A heavy pause. Then Lucian spoke again, and each word was a hammer blow. "I do not regret protecting my sister, but I regret the cost. Every day I come home to a woman I never wanted, bound by vows I never wished to make. She tries so desperately, and I cannot return even a fraction of what she offers. It is a burden I will carry until I die." Does she know the real reason? She knows nothing. She thinks I married her for her family's connections, perhaps. I see the hope in her eyes, Marcus. It makes me feel like the worst sort of villain, but I cannot love her. I am simply incapable of it. Seraphina pressed her hand to her mouth. The hallway blurred. She turned silently and fled, her slippers making no sound on the thick carpets. She reached her chambers, closed the door, and slid down to the floor, her whole body shaking. He had never wanted her. He had never even chosen her. She was a shield for his sister's reputation, a convenient bride purchased to hide a scandal. All her efforts, all her hope, all her love, it had been poured into a void that would never, could never, return it. She did not cry. She was beyond tears, something inside her simply closed. When morning came, Seraphina rose, dressed with care, and looked at herself in the mirror. The woman who stared back had the same chestnut hair and gray eyes, but there was a new stillness in her expression, a quiet resolution. She would stop waiting for love that would never come. The change was gradual but unmistakable. The first thing the household noticed was that the Duchess no longer lingered in the halls hopping to encounter the Duke. She no longer arranged her schedule around his. She took her breakfast earlier in the sunny morning room and did not wait to see if he would join her. She stopped leaving flowers. She stopped writing little notes. The special herbal tea appeared no more. At first, no one remarked on it. Servants adjusted silently. But within a week, the absence of her small kindnesses left a hollow space in the house. Lucian noticed the morning he walked into his study and found the desk empty of fresh blooms. He paused, frowning. It was a small thing, irrelevant, yet he stood there for several heartbeats, staring at the bare wood. Later at dinner, Seraphina was perfectly polite, discussing the estate's accounts and the upcoming village fair. Her smile was pleasant but distant, as if she were speaking to a respected acquaintance rather than her husband. There was no searching look in her eyes, no hopeful silence waiting for his approval. He found it unsettling. A fortnight passed. Seraphina began dedicating her time to the tenants on the Harcourt estate. She visited the cottages herself, listening to concerns, arranging for repairs, and even helping an elderly woman plant a kitchen garden. Word of the Duchess's kindness spread quickly. The tenants adored her. She also took over the management of the household accounts, which had been neglected, and gently corrected the housekeeper's inefficient ordering. The estate began running more smoothly than it had in years. Lucian observed these changes from a distance. He saw her riding out in the mornings, her posture straight, her laughter floating back to him once when a farmer's child handed her a handful of wildflowers. She looked happy, she looked free, and she never looked his way. A faint, unfamiliar unease stirred in his chest. "Your wife is remarkable," Marcus commented one afternoon as they rode through the estate. "I passed the East cottages yesterday. The tenants cannot stop singing her praises. One woman said the Duchess sat with her sick child for 2 hours while she fetched the physician." Lucian's jaw tightened. "She has always been kind." "Yes, but she seems different lately. More self-possessed. She used to watch you like you were the sun, Lucian. Now she barely glances at you. What happened?" "Nothing happened." Marcus raised an eyebrow but said nothing more. That evening, Lucian found himself standing outside Serafina's sitting room. The door was slightly ajar. She was writing letters, her profile calm, a small smile curving her lips. She looked at peace. He realized with a jolt that he could not remember the last time she had smiled at him like that. She had once smiled at him constantly, tentative, hopeful smiles that he had met with cool politeness. He had been a fool, but he did not yet know how deep his folly ran. The first real crack in Lucian's composure came when he met Mr. Edmund Ashby. Mr. Ashby was a land steward, newly hired to oversee some of the Harcourt estate's outlying farms. He was a man of perhaps 30, with an open, honest face, gentle brown eyes, and a manner that put people at ease. He was also, Lucian noted with immediate irritation, utterly captivated by the Duchess. Lucian first saw them together in the garden. He had been walking back from the stables when he heard Serafina's laugh, a genuine, warm sound he had not heard directed at him in months. He rounded the hedge and stopped. Serafina stood by the rose arbor, a basket of cuttings on her arm. Ashby was beside her, pointing at something in the distance, his expression animated. She listened with obvious interest, her eyes bright. As Lucian watched, Ashby reached out and gently brushed a petal from her sleeve. The gesture was innocent, respectful, and yet Lucian's hands curled into fists. "Your Grace," Ashby said, spotting him and bowing. Serafina turned, her smile fading into a polite mask. "Lucian, have you met Mr. Ashby? He has wonderful ideas for the drainage system in the lower fields." "Indeed," Lucian said, his voice colder than he intended. "I was not aware you spent your afternoons with land stewards." Serafina's gaze sharpened, but her tone remained mild. "I spend my afternoons improving the estate. Mr. Ashby's expertise has been invaluable." Ashby, sensing the tension, excused himself with a bow. As he walked away, Lucian stepped closer to Serafina. "You should be careful," he said quietly. "People might misunderstand." Her eyes met his, steady and unblinking. "I have given no cause for misunderstanding. Mr. Ashby is a good man who treats me with respect. That is more than I can say for some." She turned and walked back toward the house, leaving him rooted to the gravel path, a storm gathering in his chest. He was jealous. The realization struck him like a physical blow. He, who had kept her at arm's length for 2 years, who had married her for duty and resented the necessity. He was jealous of a steward for making his wife smile. That night Lucian sat alone in his study, a glass of brandy untouched before him. He replayed the scene in the garden again and again. He saw her laugh, saw the steward's easy manner, saw the way she had looked at him, not with desperate hope but with simple, comfortable friendship. She had stopped looking at Lucian that way. She had stopped looking at him altogether. He remembered her words from the terrace months ago. "Lady Beatrice looks at you as though you hung the stars, and you allow it." He had allowed it. He had allowed his wife to feel invisible while he bestowed his attention on another woman. He had told Marcus she was a burden. He had crushed her hope with his own careless hands. And now it seemed she had finally stopped bleeding. Serafina, meanwhile, had found a strange, quiet peace. The pain was still there, a dull ache she carried beneath her ribs, but it no longer controlled her. She had built a life within the boundaries of her gilded cage. She helped the tenants. She managed the household. She corresponded with her sister and an old school friend. She read books she had long neglected and took long walks in the countryside. She had even begun sketching again, a hobby she had abandoned after her marriage. She no longer lay awake wondering if Lucien would ever come to her door. She no longer strained to hear his footsteps in the hall. She had accepted that her marriage was a contract, not a love match. And in that acceptance, she had found a measure of freedom. The only thing she could not quite extinguish was the tiny, treacherous flare of pain she felt whenever she saw him. He was still devastatingly handsome, still commanding, still capable of making her heart stumble. But she had learned to school her features, to breathe through it, to remind herself that his beauty was not meant for her. One rainy afternoon, she was in the library, curled up in a window seat with a novel, when the door opened and Lucien entered. He rarely came to the library during the day. She looked up, startled. "Forgive the intrusion," he said, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "I was looking for a volume on estate law." "It's on the third shelf near the window," she said, gesturing. She returned to her book, expecting him to retrieve the volume and leave. He did not leave. He stood near the shelf, his gaze fixed on her. The rain pattered against the glass. The silence stretched. "Serafina," he said finally. She marked her page with a ribbon and looked up. "Yes." He seemed to struggle for words. "I have noticed you have been busy lately. The estate requires attention. You have been doing an excellent job. The tenants speak very highly of you." "Thank you." Another pause. She waited, her expression politely neutral. She would not fill the silence for him. She had spent 2 years filling silences, reaching across chasms he had no interest in crossing. "I wondered," he said slowly, "if you might join me for dinner tonight, in the small dining room, just the two of us." It was the first invitation he had extended since their wedding. Once, it would have made her weep with joy. Now it only stirred a weary confusion. "Is there a particular matter you wish to discuss?" she asked. He flinched almost imperceptibly. "No, I merely thought. We have not dined together in some time." "We dined together last week, when Lord Ashford visited." "That was a formal dinner. I meant privately." Serafina considered. She had no desire to sit across from him, making conversation that felt like drawing water from a dry well, but refusing would seem petty. She nodded. "Very well, I will see you at 8. He nodded and left, the law book forgotten. She stared at the empty doorway, her heart an uncertain, unsteady drum. Dinner was, as she had expected, awkward. The food was excellent, the candlelight soft, but the conversation was stilted. Lucien asked about her day. She answered politely. She asked about his business in London. He gave brief replies. The ghost of all their unsaid words sat between them like a third guest. Halfway through the meal, Lucien set down his fork. "Serafina, I owe you an apology." She looked up sharply. I have not been a good husband to you," he said, his voice low and rough. "I have been distant, cold. You deserved better." Her heart clenched. She had waited so long to hear those words, but now they felt hollow, too little and far too late. "Why are you saying this now?" "Because I have seen the change in you, and it disturbs me." "What change?" He met her eyes, and for the first time she saw something raw in their depths. "You have stopped waiting for me. You have stopped hoping. I did not realize how much your hope meant to me until it was gone." Serafina placed her napkin on the table with careful precision. "You told Lord Ashford that marrying me was a burden, that you regretted the cost. I overheard you, Lucien, months ago." His face drained of color. "You heard." "Every word." Her voice was steady, but her eyes glistened. "You married me to protect Lady Catherine. I was never your choice. I was a shield. I understand duty, Lucien. I understand sacrifice. But I spent 2 years loving a man who saw me as a chain. I will not spend another day doing so." He reached for her hand, but she pulled it away. "Serafina, please, I was a fool. I spoke out of bitterness and pride. I did not know you then. I did not understand." "You did not want to understand," she interrupted, rising. "You saw my hope and you despised it because it reminded you of a duty you resented. I cannot undo that pain, and I cannot trust that your sudden interest is anything more than wounded pride because I stopped chasing you." She left the dining room without looking back. That night Lucien did not sleep. He sat in his study, staring into the dying fire, Serafina's words echoing in his mind. She had heard him. She had heard him call her a burden. She had known all these months that she was not wanted, and still she had tended his tenants, managed his house, and borne his coldness with grace. He had been blind, cruelly, arrogantly blind. He thought of her smile in the garden with Ashby. He thought of her quiet, self-contained peace. She had built a life without him. She did not need him, and the realization terrified him more than anything ever had. The next morning, he sought out his sister. Lady Catherine was a gentle soul, still carrying the shame of her youthful indiscretion. She lived quietly at Harcourt Park, grateful for her brother's protection. When Lucien found her in the morning room, she took one look at his haggard face and set down her embroidery. "What has happened?" "Serafina knows," he said heavily. "She knows I married her to cover your scandal." Catherine's hands flew to her mouth. "Oh, Lucien, how?" "She overheard me speaking to Marcus months ago. She has been living with that knowledge in silence." He sank into a chair. "I have destroyed her, Catherine. I have destroyed any chance I ever had." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "But why would you say such things? She is the kindest person I have ever known. She has been nothing but good to me, to this house." "Because I was an arrogant fool. I resented the situation and I took that resentment out on her. I kept her at a distance to punish her for something that was never her fault." He buried his face in his hands. "And now I have lost her." Catherine was silent for a long moment. Then she said quietly, "Perhaps not. But you cannot win her back with words alone. You must show her. You must prove that you see her, truly see her, for the remarkable woman she is." "How?" "I do not know, Lucien, but you must find a way. Because if you let her go, you will regret it for the rest of your life." Serafina, in the days that followed, noticed a shift in the household. Small things, but persistent. A new set of watercolor paints appeared on her desk, the exact brand she had mentioned in passing months ago. The gardener began planting her favorite lavender along the paths. The cook started preparing dishes that Serafina had once told the housekeeper she loved, years ago. And Lucien was present. He did not intrude, but he was there. He appeared at breakfast, not demanding conversation, but simply sharing the room. He left books he thought she might enjoy on the hall table. He asked her opinion on estate matters and actually listened to her answers. She did not know what to make of it. She was wary, her heart armored after years of hurt. But the gestures were so thoughtful, so unlike the cold duke she had married. She found herself watching him, searching for the trick, the hidden motive. She found only a quiet, almost desperate sincerity. One evening she found a leather-bound journal on her pillow. It was not hers. She opened it and recognized Lucien's handwriting. The pages were filled with notes, observations, confessions, all dated over the past weeks. "She wore the gray dress today. She didn't look at me once. I deserved it. The tenants call her Lady Light. I understand why. She brings warmth wherever she goes. I kept her in the cold for 2 years. I saw her laughing with Ashby again. It felt like a knife. But I have no right to be angry. I gave her nothing. He gives her kindness. How can I compete with kindness when I have never shown it? I think I am falling in love with my wife. The irony is unbearable. She stopped loving me just as I began." Serafina's hands trembled as she read. Tears slipped down her cheeks. He was in pain. He was genuinely, deeply in pain. And despite everything, it moved her. But it also terrified her. Could she trust this? Could she open her heart again, knowing it might shatter? She closed the journal and placed it carefully on the nightstand. She needed time to think. Time, however, had other plans. The next morning, a letter arrived from her father's estate. Her mother was ill, seriously ill. The physician recommended family gather. Serafina's heart lurched. She packed a trunk within the hour and arranged for a carriage. She was needed at her childhood home in Wiltshire. The thought of leaving Harcourt Park, leaving Lucien, was suddenly painful, but duty called. When Lucien learned of her departure, he went pale. He found her in the entrance hall, fastening her traveling cloak. "I am coming with you," he said. She blinked. "That is not necessary, I can manage. I am your husband. Your family is my family. I will not let you face this alone." Something in his voice, fierce and protective, made her throat tighten. She nodded, unable to speak. They traveled together through the long day. The carriage was quiet, but it was a different quiet than before. It was not empty, it was charged with unspoken things. At one point the road grew rough and Serafina swayed in her seat. Lucien reached out and steadied her, his hand lingering on her arm. She did not pull away. When they arrived, Serafina's mother was frail but recovering. The crisis passed within days. During that time, Lucien stayed by Serafina's side. He sat with her mother, reading aloud to soothe her. He helped Serafina's father with accounts. He walked with Serafina through the old gardens, listening as she shared childhood memories, her voice soft with nostalgia. He did not push. He did not demand. He simply was there, a steady, quiet presence. One evening, as they sat on a bench overlooking a fading sunset, Serafina spoke. "Why did you leave the journal for me to find?" He was silent for a moment. "Because I am a coward. I could not say the words aloud, but I needed you to know. I needed you to know that I see what I did, and that I am sorry, more sorry than I can ever express. You said I was a burden. I was wrong. You have never been a burden. You have been a gift I was too blind to accept. I married you out of duty, yes. But somewhere in the past months, perhaps longer, duty turned to admiration, and admiration turned to something far deeper. I love you, Serafina. I love you, and I know I have no right to. I know I hurt you, but I will spend the rest of my life trying to make amends if you will let me." The sunset painted the sky in shades of rose and gold. Serafina looked at the man beside her, the cold duke who had once ignored her, now laying his heart at her feet. She felt the old pain, but beneath it something else stirred. Hope, fragile and new. Not the desperate, frantic hope of before, but something quieter. A seedling that might, with care, grow. "I do not know if I can trust this," she whispered. "I am afraid, Lucien." "I know," he said, his voice breaking. "Be afraid, be cautious. But please do not leave me. Do not shut me out. I cannot bear the thought of losing you." She reached out and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm and trembling. "I am not leaving," she said. "But I need time. I need to learn to believe you." He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Take all the time you need. I will wait. I will wait forever if I must." They returned to Harcourt Park a few days later. The atmosphere between them was different, tentative, but threaded with light. Lucien continued his quiet kindnesses. He no longer held himself at a distance. He sought her out not with demands but with invitations, a walk, a game of chess, a shared cup of tea. She accepted gradually, cautiously. He never pushed. He let her set the pace. One rainy afternoon, they were in the library together, reading by the fire. Serafina looked up from her book and found him watching her with an expression of such tender longing that her heart ached. "What is it?" she asked. "I was just thinking," he said, "how beautiful you are when you are lost in a book. I have missed so much. So many moments I could have had if I had not been such a fool." She closed her book. "You cannot change the past, Lucien." "No, but I can fill the future with better moments, if you will let me." She smiled, a real smile, one that reached her eyes. "I think I would like that." He crossed the room and knelt before her chair, taking her hands in his. Serafina Devereux, I married you for duty, but I love you for everything you are. Your kindness, your strength, your quiet dignity. You are the heart of this house. You are the heart of me. I was a man half alive before you showed me what I was missing. Can you, forgive me and let me love you as you deserve? She looked into his eyes and she saw the truth there. He meant every word. The ice that had encased his heart for so long had melted entirely. He was vulnerable, earnest, and utterly hers. I forgave you the moment I saw your journal, she said, her voice trembling. I was just too frightened to admit it, but I love you, Lucien. I never stopped loving you. I only stopped hoping you would love me back. He pulled her gently into his arms, and she went willingly, burying her face against his chest. He held her as though she were the most precious thing in the world. She felt his heart racing beneath her cheek. The rain drummed softly on the windows, cocooning them in warmth and quiet. I will never make you feel invisible again, he murmured into her hair. You are my duchess, my wife, my love. I will spend every day showing you. She lifted her head and looked at him, her eyes shining. Then start now. He did. The kiss that followed was tender and slow, a promise sealed in the gentle meeting of lips. It was not the passionate embrace of youthful lovers, but something deeper, a reunion, a healing, a homecoming. When they finally drew apart, they were both smiling. The months that followed were the sweetest Serafina had ever known. The ton whispered, of course. They whispered about the Duke's sudden devotion, about the way he watched his Duchess at balls, about the way he danced with no one else. Lady Beatrice pouted and found another admirer. Marcus Ashford clapped Lucien on the shoulder and said, "Took you long enough." Catherine bloomed in the warmth of their happiness, her own spirits lifting. Mr. Ashby continued his work on the estate, always respectful, and Serafina was glad to call him a friend. Lucien, to his credit, made a conscious effort to be courteous to the steward, and in time, the jealousy faded into secure affection. On the first anniversary of their reconciliation, Lucien gave Serafina a small velvet box. Inside lay a locket, engraved with a single word, always. She opened it to find a miniature of the two of them, painted from a recent sitting, their heads closed together, both smiling. I wanted you to carry a reminder, he said, his voice husky, that from now on you will never be alone, you will never be unwanted, you are my always, Serafina. She clasped the locket around her neck and kissed him, right there in the sunlit garden, with the roses blooming around them and the birds singing overhead. There were still challenges, of course. Life is never without its difficulties, but they faced them together, as partners, as friends, as lovers. The cold Duke was gone. In his place stood a man who had learned the value of love, a man who cherished his wife with a quiet, steadfast devotion that only deepened with time. And Serafina, the Duchess who had once stopped waiting, found that hope had returned, not as a frantic, desperate thing, but as a steady, glowing flame that lit her days and warmed her nights. She had been married for duty, but she was loved for herself. In the end, it was not too late. It was just in time. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Also, let us know in the comments which country you're watching from. Your support means a lot to us. Thank you for watching and see you in the next amazing story.